Hi everyone, my name is Kelly, and I am going to talk to you a little bit about how I taught my classes in 2020. So, as we all know, 2020 was a very unusual year for teaching, and I know I learned a lot as we all did. In March of this year, classes at my university went online, and I have been teaching online ever since. So, I had never taught online classes before. So, over the summer, what I decided to do was attend several virtual trainings where I learned about online best practices. And what I try to do for this class that I'm showing you today is really create an experience that may be similar to an in-person class. Because when we started the semester, we were faced with a lot of uncertainty. Our university decided to do phases. So in phase one, we were online. Everyone was online, except for a very small number of people. And we didn't know when we began the semester if in phase two, this class would be welcome back on campus. It turned out we weren't. But I say that because I want to give you a little bit of background of how I structured this course because I had to structure something that wouldn't change if we moved to an in-person class in the middle of the semester. So this is an interviewing course, and the module I'm going to show you today is about recruitment interviews. Um, I set my class up so every week my students had a learning module to complete, and those learning modules and all assignments for the class were always due on Sundays by 11:59 p.m. So another thing that I tried to do in the class was incorporate different types of learning for students. The first thing that my students had this week was their weekly chapter reading, which was done through SmartBook with McGraw-Hill. And so you can see a preview of that here where the students would read the chapter and they would do a learning check and get points for that learning check. The next thing I did every week was I recorded lectures for the course. But these lectures were a little bit different than a traditional class lecture. So in my online training over the summer, I learned about best practices for videos. And basically what I learned is that students aren't going to watch an hour-long video lecture from their professor. And it was recommended to really pare down those lecture videos. So what I decided to do was record mini lectures. I kept my weekly videos at around 10 minutes each, and that may mean that students had more than one video throughout the week. So for this chapter, the recruiting interview, the book was very basic. I wanted to take a different approach when I was teaching my students about job recruitment. So I really wanted to talk about gendered language in job descriptions and unconscious bias in the hiring process. So I did focus on that in this lecture video. So to continue on that path of learning about implicit bias, learning about some of the inequalities in the hiring process, I had my students take the implicit bias test from Harvard, which you can see a preview here. You can there's a number of tests that you can take on here. And I chose to do this because one of the key ways that I teach is I don't really lecture a lot. I always have my students do activities in the class, and then we talk about those activities after and have a discussion in order to facilitate that learning. So what my students had to do here was take the test, and then this is called a weekly learning activity. They had one every week. It's a very simple activity that they had to do on their own. And then just I gave them 5 points, and they just basically they might have to answer a simple question. Here they just had to tell me which test they took. And that gave them some motivation for doing those activities and also took the place of what would normally be participation points in my class for class participation in those activities. The next thing I did this week, so again, I was really trying to not only focus on what was in the book or what I did in my lecture, but show students how this is relevant in the work world, which is where we were focusing for this week. So I had them watch this implicit bias training from Facebook. Um, and it is a great training, a great video that's was really beneficial, very easy to follow. And so I wanted my students to see that this is being talked about in the workplace as well, because I felt that was very important. So they watched the video, and again, I didn't just have them watch the video. I wanted them to apply and think about what they were learning. And so another thing that my students did, not every week, but throughout the semester, was write short reflections. These were one-page papers, double spaced, where I would give them prompt questions, and they would apply and reflect on what they learned in whether it was the book, the lecture, or other things that I had assigned. So here I wanted them to talk about the unconscious biases that they learned in the training, and also think about how will they use this in their life. What might they take away from this? And again, these are things that in the classroom setting I would talk about. We would have a class discussion about, but because we're in the online format, I did these through reflection papers. And finally, the last things I did this week. So these are just some assignments that they had coming up. Um, if they had an assignment coming up, I always tried to include a link so they could have a very organized, easy way to find everything they needed to think about or read for that week. But the last thing that I liked to do was a get to know you post. So my students got a very small amount of bonus points if they completed every weekly get to know you post. You can see here I said, what is your favorite holiday and why? So these are essentially icebreaker questions. And my students, would respond here. And the reason that I had them do these is because I really wanted to create that affect in the class. I wanted them to get to know their classmates a little better, to look forward to seeing what the discussion post was, to look forward to getting on Blackboard for the class, those sort of things. So I find both through my training and in pedagogy and also in the trainings I participated in this summer, you really have to create engagement in the class, create that relational aspect. So that's what I tried to do there. So that is very quickly just one of the weeks, what a week looked like in my class, and also some of the things I talked about through my interview class this semester.